The moment you hear that ancient Arctic settlers were ordered never to pass down a technique because it worked a little too well, your curiosity kicks into overdrive. Not because it sounds mysterious, but because you instinctively know anything that effective, anything that quietly terrified leaders and rival tribes, had to be a game changer. And this one absolutely was. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't even a piece of gear. It was a survival method so simple and so brutally efficient that it reshaped entire settlements across the north. For generations it stayed hidden, whispered, but never taught again. And today you're going to learn exactly how it worked. Welcome back to Legacy of Survival, where history isn't a dusty book, it's a toolbox. And this technique, it's one of the sharpest tools ever forged in the cold. When Vikings pushed deeper into Arctic territories, they faced conditions that punished even the hardiest warriors. Winter wasn't a season, it was a force. Temperatures dropped low enough to freeze wet hands in minutes. Food was scarce. Fuel was precious. And shelter, no matter how well built, leaked heat like a cracked barrel. Many explorers from warmer regions froze, starved, or turned back, and yet certain Viking outposts thrived. They pulled off something explorers centuries later, including World War II soldiers in the same latitudes, couldn't understand. How were these settlers surviving winters so brutal that even the animals migrated away? The answer came down to a single trick. A method so effective that church elders, later settlement lords, and even regional authorities banned it. They feared its power. Feared what happened when people no longer needed the official systems designed to keep them compliant and dependent. But that ban didn't kill the technique, it only buried it, and the ground, just like the Arctic itself, kept it well preserved. Let's jump straight into the core of the method, because this is where the brilliance hits you. The Vikings learned that the real secret to Arctic survival wasn't fire. Everyone could gather wood, anyone could spark a flame. But flames were loud, smoky, visible from miles away, and burned through fuel like a greedy god demanding sacrifice. The real power came from capturing heat, not generating it. They discovered a method of creating silent, long-lasting warmth, using a mix of compacted organic material, controlled airflow, and micro-insulation chambers inside their living spaces. Imagine a heat battery, not a fire, slowly releasing thermal energy through the night while using a fraction of the fuel. The technique centered on three elements working together: stored daytime warmth, ground insulation, and slow-burning fuel packed in a way that didn't flare. Instead of flames, it produced a steady thermal rise. No smoke signals, no bright light that gave away your camp, no sudden bursts of heat that died off too fast. Just a stable, invisible warmth that kept a person alive at temperatures that should have ended them. Why hide it? Well, because any community that can heat its homes without relying on large fuel-gathering operations suddenly becomes independent. And, you know, independence was a threat. But here's where it gets fascinating. The technique wasn't just about heat. The Vikings believed survival should work in a loop. Nothing wasted, everything reused. When they settled in frozen regions, they applied that philosophy to heat as well. Warmth generated from one source was rerouted, trapped, redirected, and reused. Animal hides weren't just blankets, they were thermal reflectors. Underground pits weren't just storage, they were temperature stabilizers. Even the layout of a room served a purpose, shaping the airflow so warm air pooled instead of escaping. They treated heat like water that needed guiding. The brilliance wasn't in one trick. It was in layering several small advantages that, combined, created a dramatic difference in temperature. That's the part settlers were told not to pass down. Not the hides, not the pits, not the airflow, but the system, the way it all connected. Because when used together, it could keep a home warm, with almost no wood at all. Imagine the shock of later authorities. You can't tax what people don't need. What made this technique legendary, almost mythical, was its adaptability. Vikings didn't have modern insulation, metal stoves, or energy-efficient design principles. They learned directly from nature. Snow itself became an insulator. Animal fat became a slow thermal emitter. Certain moss species trapped heat better than cloth. Even ashes from old fires were used to regulate oxygen in micro-heating chambers, preventing flare-ups. Archaeologists studying preserved northern dwellings were stunned. The layered insulation was so advanced that modern researchers compared it to early versions of multi-wall thermal design. Some World War II engineers stationed in northern bases, they actually rediscovered similar principles and described them as primitive yet impressively efficient. So, yes, this Viking technique wasn't superstition or legend. It was engineering. Cold weather engineering centuries ahead of its time. And here's the part that really hits home for survival-minded viewers. This technique didn't depend on rare materials. It didn't require metal tools or advanced craftsmanship. It was built on awareness, observation, and resourcefulness. The same mindset that has carried humans through famine, war, migration, and collapse. When you understand how they thought, you start seeing opportunities everywhere. Every space around you becomes a heat trap waiting to be optimized. Every scrap of material becomes insulation. Every fire becomes a reservoir of thermal energy. The Vikings weren't just tough, they were clever, and they knew the cold better than anyone before or after. Could it still work today? Absolutely. You know, modern buildings leak heat from floors, windows, and roofs. Most people these days rely entirely on heaters that lose warmth the second they shut off. You can apply the same principles in shelters, cabins, emergency situations, and off-grid living. The core idea, really, remains unchanged. Generate less heat, but trap more of it. Use dead space as insulation, control airflow, and create pockets of stored warmth during the day so they release at night. You don't need to run into the woods and live like a Viking to appreciate how powerful that mindset is. You just need to understand that honestly, mastering your environment is always better than fighting it. This part always sparks debate, but the historical pattern is clear: suppressed. Any technique that makes people less dependent, less compliant, less vulnerable, less tied to authority, eventually gets suppressed, banned. The silent heat system wasn't banned because it was dangerous. It was banned because it was empowering. It worked too well. It allowed small groups to survive in places officials believed no one should live without permission or oversight. And so the ban was enforced quietly. Teach the basics, not the system. Pass the methods, not the mastery. But the Arctic keeps secrets well. And today we can see the technique for what it truly was: a breakthrough in human adaptability. If you're into survival, history, or the raw ingenuity of ancient cultures, this old northern trick is a reminder of what humans can do when the world pushes back hard. The Vikings didn't just survive the Arctic, they mastered it. And their most powerful technique, the one meant to be forgotten, still has lessons worth carrying today. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you subscribe, drop a like, and share this video with anyone who loves seeing the hidden side of history. There's so much more to uncover, and together we're keeping these stories alive.